I think for sustainable transport, there are two major challenges that I see. One is the traditional belief of how you find solutions to existing problems really is not the right way. So there's a whole paradigm change in how sustainable transport is addressed from what it was. So you have mindset differences between those who are the traditional minded people. So you have a lot of cars, so you widen the road and you build a flyover and you solve problems that way. The current thinking today is no, you need to reduce the number of cars, reduce the number of roads or the road space, and focus on public transport. That's one side of the problem. The other, which is even moving on to public transport, is there are different components to the system. Most large cities would have a metro, would have a bus system, would have roads, would have parking, would have a whole gamut of components that go into a larger mobility system. Institutionally, these are fragmented. So each one does its own bit on its own without talking to the other. And one of the big reforms that was expected in the JNNURM was you get an integration of these through something called the Unified Metropolitan Transport Authority. Because it was a requirement, many cities set it up, but they were really not fully functional the way they were expected to perform. That is something that in the next few years we need to try and address. How do we bring about integration in the planning process for transport? See, once the integration happens in the planning process, the implementation can still be segregated, or individual agencies can do the implementation, but someone centrally is making sure that what is expected to be done is done. To my mind, that is going to be the big challenge. A gap in doing this is how do you prepare that common strategic plan? And it's very important that that common strategic plan should be linked to how land use is decided. It has to be linked to land use. There aren't very effective or there aren't very easy toolkits through which you can do this. That is something that we need to develop, and that's part of a kind of low-hanging fruit that we need to work on to come up with methodologies for developing integrated mobility plans. That, I think, is the challenge before us right now. There are projects in the sense that most cities have prepared what's called comprehensive mobility plans. But the big question is the quality of these plans. Is there a strategic vision behind those plans? Or is it just a wish list of I want this flyover and this metro and this BRT and this put together into a stapled bunch of projects that we want? It's not focusing on the kind of outcomes we want. So suppose you would say something like, in Bangalore, I want people to be able to get from any place to any place in Bangalore within 1 hour and without making more than one transfer. So that is the ultimate outcome I'm looking for, and not having to pay more than so much in being able to travel. That is the outcome I'm looking at. Now it's moving from that outcome to what do I need to do to get that outcome. That's the mindset change that needs to happen. So I would say most cities have developed comprehensive mobility plans, but these are only a bunch of projects that they want. We need to change the way in which these mobility plans are developed. And I don't know of any projects that are reviewing this to come up with the right kind of plan. But at least I know that there is some thinking or there is some recognition that what we've done so far is not the best. We need to improve on that. I think that's a good starting point. So what is the objective of these? If you take land value capture or you take transit-oriented development, what really is the objective of this? I think land value capture, one big objective of land value capture is, can you get additional money through these for financing urban infrastructure? After all, if you build a metro, the value of the property around that metro station goes up significantly. So whoever owns that property is getting a killing, but without putting the money into building the metro. So can the state capture a bit of that property value increase and use it for financing the metro? That's primarily the objective. It's been tried out in a number of countries. There are examples around the world. There have been a few challenges. The primary challenge is to be able to assess which property has gone up by how much. And there are usually disputes, no, you've over-assessed and things like that. His value has gone up more than mine. These are implementation challenges which can be taken care of. But at this point of time, I haven't seen any real effort at introducing this in a structured way. I have seen talk about it, I have seen thinking about it, but I haven't seen any definite efforts at implementing it. My guess is when the Smart Cities program takes off, the kind of investments that will be made or will need to be made will be far more than what the government of India is giving. And this is where states and cities will start thinking of what are the alternative methods of raising money, where land value capture will be one of them. Now, what is transit-oriented development? Transit-oriented development, again, the purpose is how do you evolve land use patterns in a way that promotes the use of transit. So around a metro station, you would have very high-rise buildings and a good walking environment so that people can get to the metro station easily. And a lot of people stay close by to the metro station, so that's the idea of transit-oriented development. Again, a lot of work on this has started, but in bits and pieces. And frankly, I think that's the way it should happen. Few cities do it. Delhi has taken up something. Bangalore has probably taken up something. So few cities will take up a few pilots. These will be lessons for the rest of the city. This will also be lessons to other cities. So I think the fair amount of work on that is already happening. A lot of people say that, you think of transit-oriented development, but what about the rest of the city that is already in place? And I think in India, we have the advantage that people are still moving into urban areas. Our urban areas are not saturated. And in the next 25 to 30 years, we'll have as many people moving into the cities as we have today. So if you think about the people who are moving in and trying to persuade them to stay in transit-oriented development areas, even if you don't affect the current population, that itself is a huge, step in the right direction, I would say. See, efforts have been made at communicating, but very often the impression is that I'm building this project, so why should anyone have any objection? Let me just go ahead and build it. But then every time you're doing a project, and particularly a BRT project, you are affecting people who are, close to the construction sites. You're blocking off a lane or you're blocking off a road for some time, and people get hurt by it. And it's been seen world over that good communication in telling them why you are doing this, how long will it take, and recognizing that they have a certain need which has been hampered, and to what extent are you providing alternatives to meet that need. I think that is very important for any kind of a mass transit project. It's happening in some places. Some cities recognize it, they do a good job. Others don't do a good enough job. But I think the recognition of good communications and telling people what you're doing has become extremely important. In fact, some of the discussions that we had, we realized that today we've come to a situation where a public transport agency is not enough to just put in the service, but you need to constantly market what you've done. This is critical because today public transport is, you're competing with the car. people who use cars, we want to get them onto public transport. So you're really competing with the car, and marketing is becoming a very important part of doing that. You see, the idea of the index is twofold. One, how is a city performing compared to others? Two, how is the same city performing over a period of time? So the idea is, can we have certain metrics which can be used to make this comparison? That's really our objective. And the way we are doing it is, we've used 5 or 6 broad elements to this. What is the employment potential in a city? What is the quality of life in a city? What is the environmental quality in a city? How good is the mobility system in the city? So we've used 5 or 6 broad themes, and for each of these themes, we've identified a set of indicators. And what we're doing is, we are collecting data for each of those indicators. That will be able to tell us how you compare one city versus the other. Now, some of the questions that came up when we were developing this index was, whom is it for? And different groups of people will look at different aspects of a city to decide whether it's good or bad. So a person who's young, looking to find a job, would like to go to a city where there's good employment potential. Maybe someone who's already working but is looking for a change will want to go to a city where there's good schools for his children. Maybe someone who's older and retired and looking for a place where he wants to live will go to a city where there's good health care. Someone who wants to come in and make an investment will look for a city where the governance system is good and approvals come quickly without too much harassment, and where housing and things like that are good and his employees will be happy to come in. So different sets of people would have different requirements. And when you have an index of this sort, how does it cater to all of them? Now, that's very difficult. That's very difficult. That's one of the challenges we're facing. Is what we've decided is that apart from maybe a common metric, we would have metrics for individual aspects, so that people could then take a decision. I don't want to go by the common metric, I want to go by this metric. You have it today for educational institutions. You rate engineering colleges, you rate business universities, and they do it on multiple factors. So quality of the faculty, quality of the infrastructure, the placement record. So same way we are also trying to use different metrics. We are facing a bit of a problem. Data is not easy to get. So we are in the process of collecting the data. And what we're hoping is that by the first week of December, we would have our first round available. We want to do it as an annual exercise. Right now, we're doing it on our own with whatever help people are giving us, but we will be looking for partnerships going forward. It's always best if many people come together, there's greater credibility. But we thought, let's first have a product and then look for partners, they'll come more easily. That's what we're doing right now. I think the big role that IIHS or any institution like IIHS can play is in building capacity. To my mind, one of the biggest challenges in the urban sector today is the lack of capacity, and that is a huge problem. A lot of people recognize it, everyone talks about it, but very little is really done about it. And institutions like IIHS or institutions like ISB, we are available to do things, but it's not possible for either of us to just go in and say, I'm going to start doing this. Someone has to take us on board. I think that's an area that needs to happen, really needs to happen. I feel capacity building is one of the most important aspects of building smart cities.